ChatGPT said. The lights dimmed as the host returned to his seat. He smiled at the audience and addressed the camera. Behind him, the grand hall stood silent, save for the soft hum of the air conditioning. He thanked everyone for staying through the special broadcast, then gestured toward the guests. Lon sat forward, his eyes bright. Melania adjusted her posture, calm and poised. The former president leaned back, taking a final sip of water. It was time for the closing segment to look ahead at how empathy and innovation could shape tomorrow. The host began, "Tonight we have seen lessons of trust, connection, and turning doubt into strength. Now, let's imagine what comes next." He turned first to Elon. "Elon, you build rockets that reach for Mars. How can the spirit of exploration inspire people at home?" Elon leaned back in his chair. He thought for a moment, then spoke with quiet passion. "Exploration is about curiosity," he said. "It is the same drive that pushes a child to learn to read or a scientist to solve a problem. When people feel curious, they tap into their own potential." He paused, looking around the room. "If we can share that sense of why not, we can encourage innovation everywhere, from small workshops to large corporations. Curiosity, coupled with empathy for people's needs, can change lives." Melania listened and nodded. She turned to the host when it was her turn. "Empathy is about understanding others' feelings," she began. "When we see the world through someone else's eyes, we can create solutions that truly help. For example, when I met children in school gardens, I felt their excitement and curiosity. That feeling guided our programs to be fun and useful." She smiled softly. "If leaders, inventors, and everyday people lead with empathy, we can build products and policies that work for everyone." The former president spoke next. "Empathy and innovation go hand in hand," he said. "When I met business owners in small towns, I listened to their concerns. That empathy led to policies that supported their growth. Innovation in government means finding new ways to serve people better." He straightened his tie and added, "If public servants and private leaders work with both bold ideas and care for people's lives, we can face any challenge, climate, health, or the economy." The host thanked them and shifted the focus to the live audience. "Let's hear from you one last time. What do you see as the next big step for combining compassion and creativity?" A young engineer stood. She spoke of designing affordable housing that used recycled materials. She asked how to balance cost, aesthetics, and the needs of low-income families. Elon smiled and answered first. "Affordable housing needs a rethink," he said. "We can use 3D printing and new materials to lower costs, but we must involve residents in the design. Ask them what they need: privacy, green space, safety. That empathy builds trust and makes the innovation succeed," Melania added. "Community input is powerful. When I helped open a community center, we held listening sessions. We asked parents what programs their children wanted. That feedback shaped our plans. The result was a center that people used and loved." She looked at the engineer and said, "Let people feel heard, and they will support your work." The former president nodded. "Policy can help by offering incentives for such projects. Grants, tax breaks, or low-interest loans make it easier to launch innovative housing programs. When government, business, and community work together, great things happen." The host thanked the engineer and turned to another audience member, a teacher who asked about using technology and empathy in education. Elon spoke about virtual reality simulations that let students walk through historical events. Melania emphasized caring for each student's emotional well-being alongside tech tools. The former president spoke of investing in teacher training and digital infrastructure. Each answer showed how creativity and kindness could work together. As the live questions ended, the host turned back to the guests. "Before we close, what final message do you want to leave our viewers?" Elon spoke first. "Don't be afraid to dream big," he said. "But always ask, who benefits? Use that question as a compass. Let your inventions serve people, not the other way around." Melania followed, her tone gentle yet firm. "Be kind to others and to yourself. Empathy is a practice. Listen more. Then you speak. Seek out stories different from your own. That openness will light your way. The former president spoke last. Take action, he said. Ideas mean nothing without deeds. Find one small thing you can do today, at home, at work, in your community, that reflects empathy and creativity. Then build on it. That is how change begins. The host thanked them for their wisdom. He looked out at the audience and at viewers. Watching from home? Tonight we have seen how leaders from different worlds can come together around shared values, trust, persistence, curiosity, empathy, and action. It is a powerful reminder that no matter who you are or where you come from, you have the power to shape the future. Behind the scenes, the network director signaled the end of the broadcast. The cameras pulled back, capturing a wide shot of the stage, 3 figures in conversation. The grand hall behind them, and the audience leaning in, as if part of the dialogue. A moment later, the studio lights brightened, and applause filled the space. As the crew began to dismantle cameras and pack cables, the host rose and shook hands with Elon, Melania, and the former president. They exchanged smiles and nods and no speeches, no fanfare, just shared respect. In the green room, producers and aides gathered around monitors, showing social media feeds. The hashtag Live Summit soared. Clips of Melania's late-night story. Elon's lessons on persistence, and their joint call for empathy trended worldwide. Elon checked his phone and saw messages from his engineers applauding how he connected space travel to everyday life. He smiled and replied, "We're only getting started." Melania received texts from former staff and volunteers, praising how she highlighted the power of small acts. She quietly noted each message, grateful for the support. The former president spoke with his advisors, planning visits and speaking engagements to carry forward the broadcast's themes. By morning, news headlines carried the story. Papers wrote about a surprising moment of unity among high-profile figures. Television analysts replayed clips. Melania in the empty dining room, Elon recalling rocket landings, they're shared. Belief in purpose and care? Op-eds debated the impact. Social media continued to buzz with comments and creative memes. The show had become more than an event. It had sparked a conversation about leadership in every sphere of life. Across the country, teachers used the broadcast as a teaching tool. They showed students clips to discuss trust and empathy. Business leaders organized watch parties for employees, then held workshops on innovation and kindness. Community groups invited speakers to expand on the ideas. Our national charity even launched a campaign inspired by the summit, One Small Step, encouraging people to perform one act of empathy and share the result online. In Washington, organizers of the broadcast met to plan a follow-up event. They wanted to take the conversation on the road, bringing live summits to cities across the nation. They aimed to include local leaders, mayors, entrepreneurs, youth, advocates sharing how they applied empathy and innovation in their communities. The original guests agreed to join when possible, lending their voices to a wider movement. Elon's team began planning a new educational outreach program. At SpaceX, partnering with schools to teach students about science and compassion. Melania returned to her philanthropic work with renewed focus on listening tours, where she would meet people in small towns to learn their needs firsthand. The former president announced a series of town hall events emphasizing the value of action guided by care. Months later, the impact of that live broadcast showed itself in small ways and large. A startup used 3D printing to build a low-cost wheelchair designed with input from disabled users. A city transformed a vacant lot into a community garden inspired by Melania's White House story. Teacher piloted VR history lessons that let students experience life in ancient civilizations, then wrote a paper on how empathy deepened their learning. All these efforts bore the imprint of one simple idea, that greatness arises when people combine bold vision with genuine concern for others. From the rocket scientist to the former First Lady to the leader of a nation, the message was the same. Innovation without empathy is empty, and empathy without action is wasted. Together, they can change the world. And so, long after the cameras stopped rolling, the ripples of that evening continued to spread. People remembered the calm voice in the dark dining room, the thrilling roar of a rocket, and the sharp lesson about substance over style. They carried those moments into their own lives, into boardrooms, classrooms, and living rooms, each person taking one small step toward a kinder, brighter future. In that way, the Live Summit was never really over, lived on in every act of empathy, in every spark of curiosity, and in every effort to turn criticism into opportunity. Because the true power of any story lies not in its telling, but in what people do after they hear it. The host leaned in, his voice warm. We've heard about building trust and leading through small acts of kindness. Now, let's talk about criticism. Every public figure faces it. Tell me, Elon, how have you handled criticism when people doubted your vision? Elon thought for a moment. He glanced at the camera as if speaking directly to each viewer. In the early days of SpaceX, he began, critics said reusable rockets were a waste of money. They said no one could catch a booster after launch. After every failed landing, headlines called us fools. It stung. I knew we had to stay calm and keep working. He paused, folding his hands. Each time we failed, we learned something new. We changed the design, adjusted our approach, and tried again. Then, when we proved it worked, those same critics praised us for innovation. It showed me that persistence in listening to feedback can turn doubt into support. Across the desk, Melania nodded thoughtfully. The former president watched with interest. The host turned to her. Mrs. Trump, you guided your public image. In the White House under constant scrutiny, how did you respond when criticism came? Melania took a steady breath. Criticism can be harsh, she said quietly. When people questioned my choices, my outfits, my speeches, it felt personal. But I learned to focus on the message behind the critique. If they disliked a speech, I asked, did I explain my work clearly enough? If they talked about my dress, I thought, did I show respect for the occasion? She paused, her eyes soft but clear. I realized criticism often hides a deeper question. Why are you here? Or what do you stand for? By answering that, I could shape the conversation. I used criticism as a guide to sharpen my purpose and improve my approach. The former president leaned forward. I faced criticism too, he said, voice strong as president. I was under a microscope. Every tweet, every decision was judged. In the beginning, I felt defensive, but I learned to listen to the core of the feedback. Some criticism came from political opponents, but some came from citizens who wanted better schools or safer streets. He paused and looked at Melania. When I focused on meeting people's needs like improving jobs and supporting businesses, criticisms lessened. They saw real results. He turned back to the host. It taught me that criticism can show you where to work harder. The host smiled, his eyes bright. You. Now, let's explore how turning criticism into opportunity can change not just images or projects, but lives. Elon, tell us about a time when public doubt almost broke your spirit, and how you found strength to keep going. Elon sighed, his gaze distant for a moment. There was a launch that failed spectacularly, he recalled. The rocket exploded on live TV. We lost millions of dollars and months of work. I thought, maybe this dream is too big. But then I looked at my team. Their faces showed determination, not defeat. That gave me strength. He leaned forward, voice steady. He held a team meeting, no blame, no anger. We asked, what can we learn? We wrote down every cause. Then we fixed each problem, step by step. Months later, that same model landed perfectly. The joy on the landing pad was worth every failure. The host turned toward Melania again. Mrs. Trump, how did you find strength when personal criticism felt overwhelming? Melania's eyes flicked to the audience, then back. I remember a time when photos from a public event were shared without context. People misread the moment and spread rumors. It hurt. I felt misunderstood. But then I thought of my goals as First Lady, supporting children's programs, promoting health initiatives. It gave me purpose. She smiled gently. I reached out to a young volunteer I had met earlier. She told me how much our school garden project meant to her. Suddenly, I saw that criticism was noise. My real work was helping people. That kept me going. The former president nodded in agreement. When you focus on what matters, criticism fades, he said. People's voices become a guide, not a threat. The host looked between them. These stories show how criticism can serve as fuel for growth. Let's turn to the audience. We have a live question here. Camera panned to a young woman in the crowd. Yes, please. The woman stood. Thank you. I work in a small business. When I share ideas, some people say I'm too ambitious. How can I handle that criticism without losing confidence? Elon smiled. Ambition is a gift, he said. When I heard impossible, it pushed me to set higher goals. But it can be discouraging. My advice: break big ideas into small steps. Celebrate each success. When you show progress, critics often become supporters. Melania added, listen to feedback, but remember your purpose. If your goal is to help customers or make good products, keep that focus. Use criticism to refine your work, not to shut you down. The former president spoke last. Build a team that believes in your vision, he said. When you have people who share your goals, criticism at the edges won't shake you. The young woman nodded, smiling. She sat down, encouraged. Host looked back to the camera. We have one more question before we move on. A gentleman in the back, please. An older man stood. Good evening. I'm a teacher. When I try new methods in my classroom, some parents complain. How do I turn that criticism into something positive for my students? Elon spoke first. Try running a small pilot, he said. Share clear results with parents. Show them. Test outcomes. Student feedback. Data helps turn doubt into trust. Melania leaned forward. Invite parents to be part of the process, she suggested. Hold a workshop or open day. When people see how you work and why you care, they feel included. The former president agreed. Engage your audience, he said. When people feel heard, they become partners, not critics. The host thanked them. Your advice shows how criticism can build bridges, not walls. He turned to the guests. As we wrap up this section, what final thought do you want to leave our viewers? With Elon spoke first. Embrace feedback. It's free advice, he said with a grin. Use it wisely. Melania smiled. Remember your purpose. Let that guide you through doubts. The former president nodded. Lead with results. Show people what you can do. The host rose from his seat. Thank you to our guests and our live audience. On our next segment, we'll look at how innovation and empathy combine to shape our future. Stay tuned. Applause filled the hall as the cameras cut to a brief break. Back in the green room, aides and staff buzzed with energy. Social media feeds showed hundreds of comments praising the panels. Honesty, one producer said, that was the heart of the show. People need to hear real stories of facing criticism, another noted. We have to make sure the next segment lives up to this. Melania sipped water, her expression thoughtful. Checked messages on his phone, trackers on the next launch. The former president talked quietly with his advisors, planning future events. The unseen stage crew prepared lights and cameras for the closing chapters. As Part 4 closed, viewers felt a shared sense of resilience. They saw that criticism, when faced with purpose and persistence, can become a tool for growth. The Live show had shown 3 leaders who turned doubt into strength, each in their own way. And everyone watching knew that in life, as on that stage, the power to transform criticism lies within each of us if we choose to listen, learn, and keep moving forward. The lights returned, and the host's voice cut through the quiet. Welcome back, Mrs. Trump. You mentioned a late-night story from your time in the White House. Would you share that with us? Melania nodded, her expression thoughtful. She looked out at the audience before answering, as if drawing energy from their attention. One particular night stood out in her mind. It was just after a long day of meetings with world leaders. The state dining room had emptied hours before. The grand chandeliers above the long table were turned low, casting soft pools of light across the polished wood. Most of the staff had gone home, leaving only a skeleton crew on duty. Yet Melania could not sleep. She felt restless, her mind still busy with the day's events. She rose from the guest bedroom on the second floor and walked down the quiet hallway. Every footstep echoed softly on the marble floors. Portraits of past presidents watched her as she passed. At the end of the corridor, two plain wooden doors marked the entrance to the dining room. She paused, her hand on the antique doorknob, and took a deep breath. Inside, the room was silent, except for the faint hum of the building's heating system. The long table still held the remnants of the state dinner: crystal glasses half full of water, plates with crumbs from the late-night snack, and elegant flower arrangements wilted slightly in the cool air. She walked slowly between the chairs, remembering the conversations that had taken place there. Conversations about peace and trade, about compassion and progress. Melania moved toward the head of the table and sat down in the seat usually reserved for the visiting dignitary. She rested her elbows on the table and folded her hands. In that quiet moment, she thought about the power of small gestures: a kind word, a genuine smile, a respectful nod. She remembered how those gestures had helped ease tense meetings, how they had reminded people that connection and civility matter, even in the highest halls of power. As she sat there, her thoughts drifted to her own role in shaping those moments. On television and in news headlines, people often saw only her designer dresses and polished appearances. But here, alone in the silent room, she felt the weight of responsibility. She felt gratitude for the chance to use her position to foster goodwill, to bridge gaps, and to create moments of human warmth. Suddenly, the door at the far end creaked. She looked up to see a staff member, young Aid, enter, quietly carrying a tray with 2 cups of tea. He paused when he saw her seated alone. "Mrs. Trump, I'm sorry to disturb you. I thought you might like some chamomile tea before bed." His voice was soft, respectful. I set the tray on the table and hesitated. Melania smiled gently. "Thank you," she said. She patted the chair next to her, inviting him to join her for a moment. The aide looked surprised, but relieved. He sat down and took one of the mugs, cradling it in his hands. They sat in silence for a few seconds, sipping tea and listening to the hush of the empty dining room. After a moment, Melania spoke. "You have worked long hours," she said kindly. "You deserve rest. What brings you here at this hour?" The aide shifted in his seat. He explained that he had been fixing a small candle display in the east room when he realized Mrs. Trump might still be up. He told her he admired the way she handled all the public events, how she always remained calm under pressure. Melania listened as he spoke, nodding. She asked him about his own dreams. What made him want to work in the White House? What he hoped to achieve? The aide's face brightened as he talked about his love for public service and his desire to make a difference. He spoke of his small hometown, his family, and the pride he felt wearing the official White House badge. In that simple moment, Melania saw the real impact of leadership. It was not just about policies or speeches. It was about connection, about taking time to listen, to encourage, and to uplift others. She realized how easy it was to overlook these small acts when one is caught up in schedules and headlines. The aide finished his tea and stood to leave. Melania stood as well and thanked him for his honesty and his dedication. She reminded him that every person in that building played a role in serving the country, that his kindness had given her comfort that night. As he left, she watched the door close behind him and felt a quiet sense of fulfillment. Melania rose from the table and left the dining room. She retraced her steps down the corridor and returned to her room, carrying with her a renewed sense of purpose. That night taught her the power of listening, of genuine care, and of treating every person with respect, no matter their role or rank. Back on the stage, Melania paused. The audience was silent, hanging on her every word. Elon leaned forward, eyes bright with interest. Trump sat forward in his chair, his expression thoughtful. The host waited patiently for her to continue. "That moment reminded me," Melania said softly, "that leadership is not just about the big decisions. It is about understanding people's stories, sharing their hopes, and reminding them that they matter." She looked toward Elon's video image, Space travel may take us to new worlds, she said, but we will only thrive if we remember the simple things that bind us together right here on Earth. Elon nodded in agreement. That is a powerful lesson, he said. We often focus on the grand vision, roads to Mars, electric highways, but we must never forget the people who make it possible, their passion, their dedication, and their belief in the mission. Trump clapped softly from his seat. Well said, he said. I spent years in politics chasing big goals, but the work is only as strong as the team behind it. Never forget that. The host turned to Melania. Thank you for sharing that story. It shows us that influence goes beyond headlines. Lives in the moments we spend listening and caring. Melania offered a small smile. Thank you, she replied. It is those moments that shape our character and guide our actions. The mood in the studio shifted from dramatic tension to reflective calm. The audience seemed to lean in, as if drawn together by the shared understanding of one simple truth, that connection and empathy form the heart of leadership. Social media feeds lit up with praise for Melania's candid story. Viewers at home tweeted screenshots of the empty dining room and quotes about listening and care. Hashtags like #LateNightLesson and #leadership in small moments began to trend. The host guided the conversation forward. Let's talk about how these lessons apply in different fields, he said. Elon, you build rockets. Mrs. Trump, you shaped public image. President Trump, you led a nation. How can people in everyday roles carry these principles forward? Elon smiled and spoke about how SpaceX encourages every employee to share ideas and feedback, no matter their title. Melania talked about supporting local communities through listening tours and small events. Trump offered advice on how to motivate teams by recognizing achievements, both big and small. As they spoke, the audience heard practical examples of how to apply empathy and connection in their own lives. The segment flowed smoothly, weaving together lessons from politics, technology, and personal experience. Each speaker brought a unique perspective, but all underscored the importance of genuine care and consistent action. By the end of part 3, viewers felt inspired. They saw how a late-night cup of tea could become a lesson in leadership, understood that empathy is not a soft skill, but a vital force that shapes success. And they realized that every person, whether labeled president, first lady, or engineer, holds the power to make a difference through simple, heartfelt moments. As the cameras prepared to roll into part 4, the host smiled and said, "Stay with us." Next, we dive deeper into how each of our guests has faced criticism and turned it into opportunity. Don't go away. The audience applauded, eager for the next chapter in a live event that had already exceeded every expectation. The conversation on stage turned toward the meeting point between technology and public image. Elon leaned back in his chair, a mischievous smile playing on his lips. He tapped the desk lightly with one finger and said, "You know, Mrs. Trump? I was scrolling through some social media influencers last night. People who post glamorous photos from yachts and private jets. It made me wonder how real their message really is. It seems like a smile and a filter can sometimes matter more than substance." Melania studied him quietly, her calm expression intact. The audience shifted in their seats. Some murmured among themselves, others raised their eyebrows. Even the host seemed momentarily taken aback by the subtle jab wrapped inside a joke. In the front row, former President Trump's smile faded. He straightened his tie and leaned forward, his eyes locked. On the screen where Elon was speaking, the room's hush grew heavier. Reporters in the back scribbled notes faster. Camera operators angled their lenses to capture the tension between the two famous faces, one on a video feed. Elon continued, unaware of how tightly his comment had landed. "I mean, look at those perfectly posed hands on a silk tablecloth," he said, clicking his tongue. "There's artistry in the frame, sure, but sometimes it feels like we're selling ourselves instead of sharing ideas." Melania's gaze flicked from the host to Elon's video image. She folded her hands in her lap, then gently unfolded them, as if unfolding a thought. Around her, the lights of the studio glowed warmly, but the air felt charged. Social media feeds were already lighting up with clips of Elon's comment. Viewers at home wrote that Elon's critique was bold. Others defended influencers for their craft. The Hashtag ENFLUENCER artistry began to climb trending charts. The host leaned forward. He had a practiced smile, but his eyes glinted with curiosity. "That's an interesting perspective," he said. "You're pointing out a tension between image and reality. Mrs. Trump, what would you say to that? How do you balance authenticity with presentation?" Melania took a breath. She looked out at the audience as though drawing strength from the people gathered there. Then she turned her gaze slowly toward the camera. Her voice was smooth and steady. "Presentation matters," she said. "We all want to show our best selves to the world. But authenticity is more than a pose. It is every choice you make when no one is looking. It is the kindness you show, the work you do, and the promise you keep. Without those, the image is just a picture without a purpose." Her words landed like a soft bell toll. The audience seemed to exhale at once. Camera zoomed in on her face. Elon blinked in surprise. Trump's jaw relaxed as he nodded inwardly, perhaps relieved that the jab at his wife had been answered with grace. Yet Elon was not finished. He smiled again, this time more thoughtfully. "I see what you mean," he said. "But if people can mask reality with a smile or a filter, how do we know what to believe? Out there in space, we demand test data and real results. Here on Earth, how do we know when someone has earned our trust?" Melania leaned forward slightly, her posture strong. She paused before answering, as though choosing each word. "Trust grows when people see consistency," she said. "Consistent actions over time build a bridge between who you are and what you do. Look at every decision you make. If your words and your actions match up day after day, people begin to understand your real message. That is when image and substance come together." The host nodded, impressed by her reply. He turned back to Elon. "Elon, you've built a reputation on bold thinking and taking risks. How do you keep people's trust when you push boundaries that many find hard to believe?" Elon leaned in again, his eyes bright with conviction. "I think of it like this," he said. "When we launched the first reusable rocket, people said it was impossible. They laughed at the idea of catching a falling booster with a drone ship. But we kept testing. We showed them each successful landing. We shared the data and the failures alike. It's that honesty made people believe. It's not the flashiest photos that mattered. It was real proof." Melania smiled at the example. "That is a powerful story," she said. "Proof over promises." "I agree." The former president spoke up from the audience. His voice carried across the stage without a microphone, drawing attention. "There is something to be said for results," he said. Melania turned to him, surprised by his vocal participation. Trump stood, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. "When I was in office," he continued, "people talked about poll numbers and headlines. But the work we did on the economy, the jobs we created, that is what matters. Not just what you say, but what you deliver." Melania's eyes met. She gave him a small nod of respect. "Yes," she replied quietly. "Delivery is key. It shapes how people feel and what they believe. It builds confidence." Elon nodded in agreement on the screen. "Exactly," he said. "Whether it's a rocket or a presidency, deliver or disappoint." The audience applauded lightly. Tension shifted from confrontation to a shared understanding, substance over style. Yet, beneath that agreement, deeper current of competition pulsed each figure, showing their own way of earning trust and attention. Social media feeds exploded with clips of the exchange. News websites updated headlines, Melania counters, Elon on authenticity, and Trump praises results over rhetoric. The network's ratings ticked upward in real time. Off-camera aides scrambled. Someone whispered to the host that producers wanted to pivot to a lighter topic. Another producer argued that this was the moment everyone had been talking about. Collision of technology, politics, and image. The host weighed the options. He finally smiled and said, "Let's take a quick break, see what our social media panel has to say. Then we'll come back to these amazing stories of leadership, innovation, and yes, that power of real action." As the camera switched to a commercial break, Elon leaned back, brushing imaginary dust from his suit. He laughed softly. Melania, relaxed in her seat, sipping water from a glass. The former president sat down beside her, offering a supportive pat on her arm. The off-air chatter in the studio was rapid. Some crew members shook their heads in admiration. Others looked at their phones, reading the live tweets pouring in. In the green room, aides and advisors dissected every word. One aide said, "That was brilliant." She took a direct hit but turned it into a lesson on integrity. Another responded, "Agreed." And Elon looked surprised. He did not see that coming. Third noted, "Keep an eye on the hashtag counts. We're trending in 3 categories already." Show's director called for attention. "Everyone reset for the panel segment in 30 seconds, she said. "After that, we bring them back live." The host stepped off stage toward the green room door. He glanced back at Melania. "Great job," he whispered. "You made that look easy." She smiled, her eyes warm. "Thank you," she said, "but it wasn't easy." She paused, then added, "I want to share another story, one that people may not know. It happened during those long nights at the White House." Just as they prepared to head into the next segment, social media analytics lit up the control monitors. The network's hashtag Live Summit soared. Clips of Melania's words raced through YouTube channels and TikTok duets. News sites prepared analysis pieces. Late-night talk shows scripted jokes about the moment. It seemed that in this one live broadcast, 3 worlds had collided: politics, technology, and media. Image ended had created a moment no one would forget. As the countdown to live airtime began, Melania straightened her posture. Elon's image reappeared on the screen. The host took his seat once more. The lights dimmed slightly, and the cameras rolled. The audience quieted. The stage was set for Part 3, where Melania would share that late-night White House story. And each world would reveal new layers of meaning. The spark of contention had ignited something far larger, a conversation about truth, trust, and the power behind the public image. And everyone watching knew that the best was yet to come. The studio lights glowed bright as the live broadcast began. Viewers across the nation tuned in, expecting another routine evening of pundit talk and political banter. The host, a seasoned journalist with a calm voice and a steady gaze, welcomed the audience and introduced the evening's special segment, a rare gathering of high-profile figures from politics and technology. The stage was set in a grand hall in Washington, D.C., its walls lined with classical columns and rich draperies that framed the large video screen looming behind the sleek, modern desk. Seated in the front row of the audience was the former president, his posture straight and his eyes fixed on the stage. He wore a tailored dark suit and a red tie that caught the light with each movement. Though no longer in office, he drew attention wherever he went. His presence here spoke of a man still deeply involved in the public eye, eager to watch and be part of the conversation. Whispers rippled through the audience as people recognized him. Some shifted in their seats to catch a better view, while others quietly took notes or tapped away on their phones. Across the room, technicians and assistants moved quickly through the aisles. In the control booth, producers monitored dozens of camera feeds and screens, making sure every angle was perfect. On the main stage, a polished wooden desk sat waiting. The host stood nearby, adjusting his microphone and straightening his jacket. A short distance away, a camera operator tested a remote link. Soon, a face many knew from space launches and electric cars would appear. Suddenly, the video screen flickered. Elon Musk's familiar face filled the frame. He appeared in a sleek home office setting, with models of rockets and electric cars lining the shelves behind him. His eyes were bright with excitement as he smiled and waved. The host welcomed him warmly and asked him to tell viewers about his latest project, the next generation of reusable rockets that could one day carry humans to Mars. Elon leaned forward, his enthusiasm clear as he described the new designs, the improvements in fuel efficiency, and the steps needed to make interplanetary travel a reality. Back in the studio, the former president watched the video feed intently. He nodded along, occasionally glancing toward the host as if comparing notes. Some audience members whispered about how the former president had once invited Elon to develop rockets in the United States, and how their past relationship had helped push space exploration forward. Now seeing them together, even across a video link, felt like a moment of history revisited. Just as Elon finished showing a short clip of a test launch, the host cleared his throat. "We have a surprise guest joining us tonight," he said. "Please welcome Mrs. Melania Trump." A hush fell over the audience. Melania walked onto the stage with graceful confidence. She wore a simple yet elegant dress in a soft pastel shade. Her expression was calm, her posture poised. There was no hint of nervousness as she took her seat beside the host. Applause rose and fell, polite and curious. Melania had rarely appeared on television since leaving the White House. Her role here was billed as special commentary on public image and media influence. Many wondered what insights she might share. People remembered her as a style icon and a private figure who valued discretion. Now invited into the spotlight, she would be sharing her views on how public figures connect with audiences in a world dominated by social media and 24-hour news cycles. The host turned toward her and smiled. "Thank you for joining us, Mrs. Trump. You have always maintained a strong sense of style and grace in the public eye. Tonight, we'd like to hear your thoughts on the challenges public figures face when their image is constantly under scrutiny." Melania nodded and spoke in a steady voice. "Thank you," she said. "It is true that public figures live under a microscope. Every move, every word is watched and judged. In my experience, staying true to your values and maintaining a sense of dignity can help people see beyond the headlines and remember the person behind the role." As she spoke, cameras cut to shots of audience members. Some scribbled notes, others leaned forward. Even the former president glanced at his wife. With pride and interest, Elon, still on the screen, watched her listen and nodded in agreement. Off camera, aides and staff in both the studio and remote control rooms whispered among themselves. "She's going to be sharp tonight," one producer muttered. "This could be more than just a commentary on style." Another technician added, "I wonder if she addressed the way social media has changed politics and business too." Melania continued, sharing an example from her time in the White House. She described how, during a major state dinner, a single photograph on social media had sparked a flood of online chatter about the table setting rather than the diplomatic importance of the event. She explained how she and her team had navigated that moment by refocusing attention on the messages of unity and respect that the dinner represented. "It was a lesson in the power of narrative," she said. "We learned that if you let the stories slip away from you, others will fill the gap with their own versions, sometimes missing the deeper meaning." Elon chimed in from his video feed. "That's a great point," he said. "Whether it's launching rockets or hosting a state dinner, storytelling is everything. You have to connect with people, show them why it matters." Melania smiled and agreed. Connection is crucial. People want to feel that what you do affects them in some way, whether it's a policy or a product. There has to be a bridge between what you hope to achieve and what people understand as their own hopes and dreams. The former president seemed to relax as he heard his wife speak. He whispered something to the person next to him, perhaps a word of encouragement. Melania's confidence grew with each passing moment. She looked directly into the camera when addressing viewers at home. Her tone was warm but firm. She spoke of the responsibility public figures have to use their platforms wisely, to speak with honesty, and to remember the real people behind every headline. Meanwhile, social media buzzed. Viewers at home tweeted screenshots of Melanians.com expression and snippets of her insight. Some praised her for speaking candidly. Others wondered what her next point would be. Hashtags like hashtag #Melania on media and hashtag Live Summit trended within minutes. Memes and reaction videos began to appear online, capturing her thoughtful words and poised gestures. Back in the studio, the host guided the conversation forward. "Thank you for that. Now, Elon, you mentioned storytelling and technology. How do you see public perception shaping the future of space travel?" As Elon began to reply, Melania listened intently. Her hands rested lightly on the desk. There was a sense that she was studying every word, ready to respond when her turn came again. The audience held its breath. The former president leaned forward, his chin resting on his hand. Even the host seemed intrigued by the quiet tension in the room. In that moment, the stage felt alive with possibility. A powerful business leader, a former first lady, and a former president all shared the same space, one physical, to virtually each with their own voice and vision. Viewers sensed that something special was unfolding. This was more than a simple interview. It was a meeting of minds and personalities, each with influence over millions. The world watched, eager to see what would come next, and all felt that this live event might change the way they thought about public image, media, and the stories that shape our shared future.